The artificial human Cell behind Frieza and Vegeta was easily one of the most popular villains in all of Dragon Ball, as well as being a perfect subject for one of these videos. With him being made from the cells of various Z fighters, he naturally reflects aspects of their personalities back at them. Now, the title says Goku, but here, instead of starting with him like I normally do for these videos, I'm going to go down the order in which he meets his components, which begins with Piccolo. So now, we can just get into it. So, Piccolo, the first person in the story who we see meet and interact with Cell as he investigates the disappearance of everyone in Jinju Town. After a short scuffle, Cell basically explains the entirety of his origin and why he's here. And if we look closely, we can see it's actually pretty similar to Piccolo's own history. Both Cell and Piccolo were created by their fathers to fulfill their grudges against Goku after their deaths. At this point, they were both also the last surviving members of their respective fathers' groups, the Demon Clan and the Red Ribbon Army, and they pretty much both defined themselves by a goal given to them by their fathers, with Piccolo initially trying to fulfill his late father's goals of conquest and getting revenge on Goku, and Cell trying to attain his perfect form as dictated by Jiro's computer. And due to both being the last surviving members of their groups, both ended up growing up alone, with Piccolo being alone in the wild and Cell in Jiro's lab. Cell also makes extensive use of abilities that he had inherited from Piccolo, such as his regeneration and the Makanko Sappo. But another ability of Cell's that can be compared to Piccolo, his absorptions to attain his perfect form. Both Cell and Piccolo take in the life forms of two others into themselves to drastically increase their own power. Both also deviate from the goals that their fathers had set for them to take over the world to form their own paths, with Piccolo changing for the better and becoming a protector and teacher of Earth, and Cell choosing to really test his power and liking the idea of wreaking havoc on Earth. Both, in the end, also do actually end up killing Goku, but in both instances, Goku was sacrificing himself, so it's not like either of them could have really enjoyed this. Another similarity, though, both sought to bring out the inner power within Gohan through very brutal means, and both of these instances of Goku's deaths led to extreme pressure being put on that awakening of Gohan's power, which actually played a role in both of their deaths. But of course, now we can talk about the differences here, namely the fact that Cell never changed his ways into being a better person like Piccolo. In fact, the direction he takes and the actions he commits throughout his arc all seem very reminiscent of King Piccolo, such as his broadcast to the entire world, his creating children for the sole purpose of fulfilling his goals, and in the end, his ultimate desire to cause fear and chaos on Earth strongly resemble the Demon King's own actions. The arc itself even directly calls back to King Piccolo, with the King of Earth directly comparing the situations of both arcs. Plus the fact that, like King Piccolo's defeat, the fight with Cell was broadcast worldwide and seen by the entire world. And like Goku before him, Gohan doesn't really get recognized for the fight. Though the reasoning is a bit different, since the reason Goku went unknown was because nobody knew who he was, whereas with Gohan, Mr. Satan had taken credit for the victory. And Cell's merging with the other life forms is a twisted version of Piccolo's, where the people whom Piccolo merged with had given his permission and willingly gave their power to him, Cell forcibly absorbed androids 17 and 18. And as for Gohan's power and their desires for it, Piccolo wanted to exploit his power for his own gains initially, wanting to use it to help him take over the world, so he brutally trained Gohan. But in that time, he had actually learned to care for the child. And in the end, Gohan's inability to draw out the power in the Saiyan saga caused Piccolo to give up his life to protect him. Cell wanted to draw out Gohan's power to use it as well, but as a way to prove his own superiority by beating that power, which he did by tormenting and hurting others. And Gohan finally gaining the ability to control that power is what causes Cell's demise. So, to Piccolo, Cell represents both a perversion of who he is, and a route where Piccolo was never changed by Goku and Gohan, so he ended up being more like his own father. Now, with Piccolo out of the way, we can move our focus on to other characters that Cell mirrors, which would now be Frieza and Vegeta. The reason I'm covering both of them together is because, as I explained in this video here, which you can go watch, Frieza himself heavily mirrors Vegeta as well, so they share a lot of the same traits. Probably the most Frieza-like instance of Cell is in his perfect form, where like Frieza, he gains a fake formal attitude that he lords over everyone else with his ego thinking he's superior to everyone. In his second form, it was where he was his most Vegeta-like, where he shared Vegeta's very loud and aggressive personality where he desires to prove his superiority of his raw strength and power. In his first form, Cell always looked down on everyone around him, and he did have a very clear ego, but he was also much more calculating and cunning. Knowing that he wasn't capable of taking out all of his opponents, he avoided contact and focused on building his own strength. Kinda like how Vegeta once acted on Namek, with his sneaking around and taking out Frieza's men one by one, knowing he stood no chance against them all together, but becoming much louder and arrogant arrogant upon gaining a transformation, like Vegeta was in the Android and Cell arcs. Perfect cells pushing Gohan's transformation into a Super Saiyan 2 also directly echo both Frieza and Vegeta's towards their own opponent's transformation. Cell learned of Gohan's inner power and wanted to draw it out and prove his superiority by statistically torturing his friends and killing Android 16. This, of course, is similar to how Frieza caused Goku's transformation into a Super Saiyan on Namek by statistically killing Goku's friends in front of him, which inadvertently led to him awakening the very power that he feared, which also had similar effects on Goku and Gohan, with both of them becoming much more ruthless and bloodthirsty in comparison to their more happy and kind personalities. Though, unlike Cell, Frieza did not want Goku to transform. In this instance, Cell echoes Vegeta from earlier in the arc, where Vegeta, in his arrogance and ego, allowed Cell to attain his perfect form, as he believed his power would be nothing to his own. So in this case, it basically combines the sadism Frieza had with the arrogance Vegeta had. And of course, like both of them, this led to his defeat at the hands of Gohan. And also, like them, he gains a massive ego where he believes himself to be the most powerful being in existence, yet as soon as his power becomes at all challenged, he breaks down and tries to take the whole planet down in his rage against his foe for beating them when he tries to self-destruct, like Vegeta's Gallic Gun and Frieza's blasting Namek to destroy it. And like both of those instances, it failed, and he still ended up losing regardless. Even Cell's dismissal of Jiro's goals for conquest can be compared to Frieza and Vegeta's own dismissals of their fathers. Plus the fact the way Cell kills future Trunks is done almost exactly the same way as how Frieza had killed Vegeta himself on Namek. For Vegeta, Cell, like Frieza before him, shows a path that he could have gone down had he not learned to deal with the problems that his ego would cause him. Cell even reflects a bit back on future Trunks too, what with them both being from destroyed futures, their main targets being Android 17 and 18, and the fact that the time in the present allowed them to get much stronger than they ever could have in their own timelines. Trunks even directly compares how Cell sacrificed speed for raw strength when he was up against Gohan to how he did the exact same thing against Cell earlier that arc. Of course, Trunks isn't one of Cell's components. The differences here are also extremely strong. Namely, the reason for why Cell did any of this is entirely for his own selfish purposes, for him to achieve his perfect form just because he can, whereas Trunks does all of this for the purpose of being able to build a better future for everyone. Even if his own future can't be changed, he still saved another future from being like his own. Now, with all of them out of the way, I can finally get to Goku. Cell's similarities to Goku begin subtly. When we are first introduced to Cell, we really quickly learn that his main goal is to increase his power by reaching his perfect form, and this desire to improve himself causes him to allow nothing to stand in his way, which is something he does share with Goku. They both knew that they weren't perfect, and made it their goal to improve themselves, which is most of the similarities between Cell and Goku in his first two forms. But then, once Cell reaches his perfect form, the similarities between Cell and Goku become a bit more apparent. The attitude he puts on against Vegeta after unlocking his perfect form is rather similar to the attitude Goku had once put on against Frieza upon unlocking Super Saiyan, happening under similar circumstances too, with both fighters now having the tables turn against their opponent after a transformation that their enemy caused one way or the other. And at this point, we see Cell's focus is now primarily on testing his newfound strength, and that's all he really cares about, even letting Vegeta go free once Trunks gets his attention. We even see Goku and Cell simultaneously figure out the weakness of Super Saiyan Grade 3, as well as Cell also clearly sharing Goku's extremely brutal honesty against his opponents. Granted, most of this can apply to numerous other characters, but the fact that right after that, Cell also starts a tournament in the style of one that Goku had fought in just to test his strength, as Goku in his youth loved competing in these tournaments for those exact same reasons, make it seem intentional. And Cell at this point does affect an overall similar demeanor to Goku, coming off as a very genuine in his approach to the tournament as somewhat sportsmanlike, which of course comes off more sinister due to the knowledge of Cell being evil, but he does agree not to cause harm until the tournament, and only really broke that because the military attacked him first. There is also the fact that when the tournament starts, Cell really views Goku as his only true worthy opponent, which comes as a combination of his ego, his being made to kill Goku, and his inheriting Goku's cells, which made him respect that strength. This is when the two are at their most similar. We can see that Cell enjoyed the fact that Goku was able to push him, which came in direct contrast to Vegeta and Frieza, who were furious when Goku actually managed to push and challenge them. Goku and Cell, even back-to-back, do similar moves, and we see both having similar thoughts of the other. The thrill and love of combat is so clearly visible in both of them with the same attitude, which really remains present through the entirety of their fight. But once that ends, we can see that this similarity also fades. And now we can go on to discuss the differences between Goku and Cell, such as the very first point. Cell's belief in his perfect form. While both desired to improve themselves, there was a point at which Cell believed he had attained perfection and was content with that. Unlike Goku, who is never content with the level he's at and doesn't at all believe in the idea that he could achieve perfection, as there is always room for improvement. And the showmanship that Cell puts on fades quickly, where Goku will remain a graceful loser in the face of greater odds, especially if the opponent isn't evil. Cell, like previous villains, doesn't. In the end, Perfect Cell's attitude is rather similar to Frieza's. Like how Frieza affects his formal businessman persona that fades once he loses the upper hand, for Cell, rather than that businessman attitude, he affects a similar sportsman attitude to Goku, but which, like Frieza, fades once he loses the upper hand. And while Cell enjoyed being pushed to his upper limits like Goku did, he did not like being surpassed, as we can see the absolute mental breakdown he has in his attempt to destroy Gohan via self-destruction, which obviously isn't very Goku-like and clearly draws on his inherited ego from Vegeta and Frieza. Along with all the previous mentioned similarities that Cell had with the others, we can really see how similar and different Cell is to Goku. But there is another figure we can compare Cell to, Gohan. The similarities are rather subtle, but they are there, namely the importance of their hybrid natures. Cell being born from the genetics of the Saiyans, Frieza's race, and Piccolo, and Gohan's being a half-human, half-Saiyan hybrid. And while it isn't genetic, he also wears Piccolo's demon gi, as Piccolo was his first teacher. Both all combine different aspects of the people or races they grew off of. Another similarity, the scenes where they transform against their enemy. In both instances, they told their opponent of a great power that they had within them or they could achieve. And in response, their enemy encouraged them to transform so that they could see this intense power and prove their superiority over it. There is also the other similarity. In the exact same chapter where we see Gohan transform into a Super Saiyan for the first time, the very next page is of Cell's transformation to his perfect form being completed, showing their progress happening in parallel to each other. As well as Cell's super perfect state being rather similar to Gohan's transformation into a Super Saiyan 2, with both being essentially limit breaker states that surpass the previously thought ceiling of the power that could be achieved in Super Saiyan and Cell's perfect form. They both even share the same electrical aura and fire at each other with a Kamehameha at the end of the arc. There is also their arrogance against their opponent. Both of them arrogantly and sadistically screw around with their enemy, with Cell edging Gohan on to transform because he felt that power would be nothing to him, and Gohan for torturing and messing with Cell instead of just killing him right away, which in the end cost both of them dearly, with Cell being killed by Gohan and Gohan losing his father in the process, as well as both were raised or created in honor of dead men, with Cell being created by Jiro's computer after his death, and Gohan being named in honor of his adoptive great-grandfather Gohan. But now, we can talk about the differences in these situations. Cell's hybrid nature is a forced union that was created out of hatred, with his origin literally being him being created from cells stolen from others to settle the grudge of a dead man, whereas Gohan, born from loving parents, raised in a good home, and while his relationship with Piccolo was initially rocky, became one of genuine companionship. Gohan's combination of all these different people was done in a natural, loving way. Cell arrogantly wanted to achieve his perfect form, and he played on Vegeta's ego to achieve it. Gohan did not want to unleash that power within, but Cell's ego made him force it to come out. Where Cell's sadistic toying and arrogance against Gohan was done out of his own ego and desire to prove himself superior, Gohan's toying and arrogance was done as a way to punish Cell for all of the people that he had hurt or killed. And in the end, Cell really is the antithesis of Gohan. Gohan is someone who, from the start, has been driven by his care for other people. Every bit of anger and rage that he has ever faced and power he gained from them was always in anger at other people being hurt, or was gained as a means to protect those people. Whereas Cell really doesn't care at all for anyone. Gohan, ever since his introduction, has been characterized as someone who cares for almost anyone, even people he didn't know. He was even trying to avoid having to kill Cell in their fight by not wanting to unleash his full power. But Cell? In the end, all he cared about was himself. Even his own children that he created, he had no care for, viewing them as merely tools for his own goals. And he didn't even care for the man who created him. His fulfilling Dr. Zero's plans for him by killing Goku was just a byproduct of what he himself wanted. Whereas Gohan has always cared deeply and fought for the people who helped raise him to who he is. Cell fought for himself, while Gohan fought for others. And that's ultimately what allows Gohan to defeat Cell. The belief that others had in him, the support they gave him in his battle, all allowed him to fully unleash his power and destroy Cell. And overall, Cell really acts as a mirror for the Saiyans themselves. The Saiyans, for all intents and purposes, like Cell, were all meant to be killers for the sake of conquest, and are now among the last living members of their original group. But like all of the Saiyans, he deviated from his initial goal he was created for. But the difference is here, where all the Saiyans moved on because they had come to care for other beings and changed for the better, Cell, again, didn't care for anyone other than himself, and his new goal was one that caused nothing but pain and misery for everyone else. And in the end, like the Saiyans and the Red Ribbon Army before him, Cell 2 was destroyed. Which is pretty much all I got for this one. This is probably my longest and most complex of these mirror videos I've ever done, especially given the nature of Cell's character and the way he acts as an evil reflection of not just Goku, but pretty much every fighter he faces. It meant there was a lot of bases to cover. Now, if you liked what I had to say here, please do me a favor by liking, sharing, commenting, subscribing, and following me on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. There'll be more videos coming soon. Thank you, and have a nice day.